Crime Curious is a true crime podcast that takes an in-depth look into real cases through the lens of a trained investigator and former prosecutor turned judge.
If you are sensitive to expletives, anatomical descriptions, and accurate descriptions of crime scenes, this podcast may not be suitable for you.
Have you or someone you love been a victim of a crime that's still unsolved? Crime Curious has teamed up with one of the top private investigation services in the Indiana and surrounding area. If you have listened to us long enough, you know that we do not seek out services or products that are meaningless to us or hold no real value. So you can trust us when we say that Corbett Investigations comes with decades of experience you won't find anyplace else. Corbett Investigations is run by a former homicide commander of one of the country's most successful homicide units, has put over 400 people in prison for homicide, handled over 1,100 death investigations, and solved 33 cold case murders. To be real with you, Mr. Corbett had a really difficult time telling us what we should highlight in this segment because he does not like to sound like he's bragging. Solving crimes has been his life's passion, and he has never done it for the accolades or recognition. He has a whole team behind his services that help him be so successful, as they specialize in things like blood stain analysis, ballistics, crime scene reconstruction, and forensic pathology, just to name a few. When you contact Corbett Investigations, you talk directly with Tim Corbett. He is hands-on with every case and can travel anywhere that's needed to get the job done. Corbett Investigations prides itself on honesty, truth, feet to the ground, real investigation work, and the strength to stand up to whatever is in the way of solving the crime. Corbett Investigations specializes in complex homicide cases, sex offenses, and criminal investigations that are old and new. Tim and his team have a reputation for finding witnesses and information that others could not. Although we hope none of our listeners ever need private investigation services, if you do, we recommend contacting Corbett Investigations and mention this segment on Crime Curious for a free consultation. Contact Tim Corbett today at 574-229-8115. You can also check them out on Facebook at Corbett Investigative Services, Inc. Thanks for listening, and now on to the show. Welcome to Crime Curious. I'm Charnell.
I'm Megan.
Megan,
I'm sorry. I'm just laughing because you guys missed us. And now this is general audience, but as Charnell is like bending over to even like press the start button, she goes, "Oh, I'm old."
It hurt. For some reason this morning, it hurt.
All of our
Let's
great
all
grace.
squeak. Do our squeakies. Here, duck squeak. Shaking all of it. This gets the good juju flowing. You handled it all very well, though.
Okay, and I'm holding the dormouse because I really just love these little crystals.
I know.
What have you got for me today? I actually know what you have
do.
for me, and I'm really excited about this.
I'm honoring you today.
Thank you.
So just so you all know, while we were on vacation together, on my birthday, we went into this cute little gift shop, and Megan found this book called Miami's Criminal Past Uncovered, because we were in Miami at the time. It is written by Sergio Bustos and Luisa Yanez. So big shout out to them. This is my source for today. It will be in the show notes as well, because I'm going to read extensively from it. So I just want to make sure that the authors get the credit that they deserve. This is their research into Miami's Criminal Past Uncovered. And Megan bought this for me as my birthday present, and it was so perfect because it has several stories, and it's about, let's see, how many pages? 117 pages.
It's a snack, as you referred to it.
It is. I love little delicious snacks like this where I can just pick up a book and read it all in one setting and just be very satisfied at the end. So it was a delightful literary snack for me. I read it on the beach with you right next to me. And it was like, oh, Megan, this is going to be a great episode. Oh, Megan, this is going to be a weird episode. Oh, so I have several stories for us. We're not doing them all today. We are just going to do one case from this today, but it's to honor you, to say thank you for such a thoughtful gift.
You're welcome. Either that or it looks terrible that for your birthday I bought you work.
Well, I enjoy both.
I know you do.
So, and it gave me a tangible book to read. Anymore with the busy life, I do a lot of Audible audiobooks for research.
I know.
Or I'm reading from the Kindle app. There is nothing like a real book in your hands. What was the first thing I did, Megan?
You smelled it.
I smelled it. For book lovers, you know what I'm talking about.
Same.
I just, an unread, and I can tell if someone has read a book or opened it extensively before they gave it to me, because it smells like them instead of new book smell. So I just love new book smell.
I'm a firm believer that on the beach, one must have an actual tangible book.
Yes.
So I've done the Kindle thing, and it is lovely, and it's quite nice because you have so many options, but there's just nothing better than pages stained with sunscreen from your fingers. And
as I was opening this back up, a little fleck of sand this morning did fall off onto the table. I was like,
that right there. Oh,
yes,
my heart.
I read this on the beach. Yeah, it was lovely. So.
Which story are you going to bring us today?
We are going to bring you, well, I guess if I'm talking to the audience.
The proverbial we.
Yes, the collective we here. The unsolved murder of 6-year-old Judith Ann Roberts. This one's a stumper, but there are some pretty legitimate theories that I think that you might buy into on this. I know I did. So let me just tell you a little bit, get started here. Remember, this is Miami's Criminal Past Uncovered by Sergio Bustos and Luisa Yanez. So Judith Ann Roberts was just a month shy of celebrating her 7th birthday when her and her sister were visiting their grandparents, their maternal grandparents in South Florida. This is July 6th, 1954.
Okay.
So Judith and her 3-year-old sister, Betty, were swimming all day at the Venetian pool in Coral Gables. Okay.
That is a lovely area around Miami as well. Coral Gables is fancy, and the Venetian is a fancy place.
Oh, absolutely. So these two little girls are, 6 and 3 and just having a wonderful time. It's a steamy, hot South Florida day. Okay. And they are visiting with their mother, whose name is Shirley Roberts, and their father, James Roberts. Now, James wanted to bring some joy to his children, especially little Judith Ann, because she had recently undergone many painful surgeries in her throat to remove a tumor that she had. So this was not only a vacation for the girls to just kind of relax and unwind, but also for Mr. Roberts. See, they're originally from Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland.
So she's had some health issues, and in that time, so in the early 1950s, mid-1950s, and she's quite young, I almost wonder if she had some type of a thyroid cancer or some tumors on her thyroid. And, at the time, they just removed those. So this little girl's already been through a lot.
She has, but at only 6 years old.
One of their parents, her mom's parents, then you said maternal, they live down in Miami. So they head down to Coral Gables.
Yes. And so Grandma and Grandpa's name are Harry and Dora Rosenberg. Okay. So they're staying with Harry and Dora, Grandma and Grandpa Rosenberg. The whole family is. So Shirley, their daughter, and their their grandchildren. And then also James Roberts, okay? James has had a lot of stress in his life recently too, not just with the illness from Judith Ann, but he'd been under a lot of stress because he's an attorney for the United Auto Workers in Baltimore, Maryland.
Oh, God, he's a union attorney for the UAW. Holy cow. Okay.
And adding to that is that unsuccessfully, weeks earlier, he had ran for a seat in the Maryland state legislation and didn't win.
Okay, so he ran to be a legislator for Maryland and lost.
He did, yep. So he ran as a candidate who supported labor unions in a state with strong union ties but couldn't muster a victory. Now, the political campaign not only took a toll on James, both physically, but also financially. Okay. James was described as being a tall, beefy, 43-year-old man. He just needed to take some time to unplug, take his family down to South Florida, where, you know, a lot of problems can just go away when you are drifting away, as we know, to the beaches and the warmth of South Florida. And he also particularly enjoyed the slower pace of life down there, which we experienced.
Yes,
we were
we
really
did.
surprised at that.
Every restaurant is an experience because you get your food very quick, but they are very slow to come to bring you your bill or have you leave. You just chill for apparently hours at lunchtime. So.
It was a lackadaisical, like these people are on vacation.
And we needed to embrace that, but we both have a problem slowing down.
Yes. We were like, wait, we're done eating. Where's our check?
And what's next?
And then we're like, wait, we don't actually have to be like that.
We have nowhere to go.
No, it was lovely. And just so you know, the family actually drove down from Maryland to Florida. So they had planned to spend 2 weeks in the Sunshine State, but it would turn out to be no vacation at all. The very next morning, so July 7th, the Roberts family would embark on a horrific journey that would forever alter the course of their lives. Miami, too, would undergo a metamorphosis of its own, losing its innocence as a small, sleepy southern town. Indeed, over the next several weeks and months, the Maryland family and the city of Miami would get the attention of the world for an event it wished had never happened. Also, it's the Roberts family, not the Maryland family. They're from Maryland.
Oh, I knew what you meant.
The story of what unfolded in Miami that summer begins at the Rosenbergs' modest duplex home on Southwest 13th Avenue back in the early 1950s. This neighborhood was home to mostly older, middle-class Jewish residents, many of whom had moved from the Northeast to escape the cold weather. It would later become home of hundreds of thousands of Cuban exiles fleeing the dictatorship of Fidel Castro. The neighborhood sits near what is now known as Calle Ocho, Little Havana's main thoroughfare and the site of the nation's largest Hispanic street festival.
It is amazing. So I went down to Calle Ocho to Little Havana, but I can also tell you from experience, there were huge settlements of Jewish populations there. And it is a true, Miami, if you've never heard it before, is a true melting pot of cultures. Yes. And it's just, they're wonderful. So beautiful and they're so beautifully combined. So you have these New England Jewish families with Cuban exiles. And then you also have a huge Haitian population and there's little Haiti there as well. But I definitely know this area and it is beautiful. You walk through that area and you can like see the far off skyscrapers of downtown Miami, but you almost get this small town vibe in the middle of a bustling city.
Yes, yeah. This is why I picked this case, because I knew you would know exactly where we're at. I also thought this was interesting. The Rosenbergs had purchased the 2-bedroom duplex at 1234 Southwest 13th Avenue.
Not going to forget your house number.
Not at all, on 13th Avenue, after Harry Rosenberg's retirement from New York's Garment District. The neighborhood is situated near downtown Miami. In the 1950s, it was quiet and dotted with the typical Art Deco style Floridian homes.
Gorgeous.
Adorned with ornate wrought iron screen doors that featured local iconic symbols like a palm tree, a flamingo, or a jumping dolphin. You still see all of those today. The quiet avenue where the Rosenbergs lived was unusual for the area because it had a grassy median that ran along its entire stretch. Today, the median is known as Monument Row and is home to numerous memorials of Latin heroes. So I thought that was really interesting.
I walked right down. In fact, I have a picture on my phone still of Gloria Stefan's.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know why. I just felt like I needed to take a picture of her star, so I did.
I do want to share this picture of little Judith.
That kills me.
I know.
She is
precious.
This cherub face.
She is.
Just these chubby freaking cheeks that you want to grab a hold of. But her hair is so beautifully coiffed under her little hat that she clearly is like Shirley Temple vibes.
It is Shirley Temple vibes. And she's wearing a cute little sailor hat.
I know.
With a cute little dress to match.
With a pinafore like dress with the collar. Oh my gosh.
I know. After spending the day at the public pool that was popular at the time, because not many people at this time had them in their backyards like they do today. So the Roberts family, they came home, all right, they bathed the girls, and they prepared them for dinner. It was a Tuesday night. The girls plopped themselves in front of their grandparents' black and white television set to watch an episode of Danger, a popular half-hour anthology suspense series on the CBS television network. That night's episode was called The Gunman and starred a young actor named Ben Gazzara. When the television show ended around 9:30 p.m., Judith Ann and Betty were put to bed by their grandparents. So Judith Ann slept on the living room couch by the front door. These are important details, guys. Under a front window. Her sister was in another makeshift bed on the back porch, which a back porch in Florida homes is different than a back porch in northern homes that we would see.
These are screened-in porches meant for summer living. Mm-hmm. Like they had couches and beds and truly comfort.
It's very comfortable. Yeah. By 11 p.m., all the adults who were at home were in bed in the 2 bedrooms. There was one person not at home. The children's father, James Roberts. You're not going to love where James was at.
Can I tell you that right now, I already have a weird JonBenet Ramsey vibe?
I know. Yeah. I get that. I did too. The doors were left unlocked for James, who had been out most of the day with a female client, Dorothy Lawrence, a younger woman who had driven down with the family from Baltimore.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Dorothy was staying at his sister-in-law's house, okay? Staying at Shirley's sister's house. Dorothy was not staying with Mr. and Mrs. Rosenberg, Shirley's parents, the girl's grandparents, right? And also James Roberts' in-laws. That's where they were staying. She did come down with the family, but she was staying with Shirley's sister.
Okay.
And she is a client of James Roberts.
Maybe it wasn't weird to carpool to Florida?
It's weird to me. I don't care if it is the 1950s. And then I'm just going to tell you right now, the reason that they weren't home is because Dorothy and James were out all night clubbing together. While Shirley is home with her parents and their 2 kids. And Dorothy is younger. She's in her 20s. Okay.
Was she basically like Shirley like allowing, I mean, it's 1950s, just allowing this affair kind of turn the other cheek?
I think so.
That's what it sounds like.
Yes. So she is staying, like I said, at James Roberts' sister-in-law's house. Dorothy Lawrence was an attractive 25-year-old woman who worked as a waitress and was in the midst of a divorce. She was friends with Shirley Roberts and had hired James Roberts to handle her divorce, which is being settled in Miami. That's why she was coming down.
I see.
With everyone fast asleep, the sound of a speeding car broke the silence of a quiet Miami night. The time was 12:30 a.m., and the noise awoke Grandma Dorothy Rosenberg.
So it basically not like peeled out or just was peeled so
out.
Loud?
Nope, it peeled out.
Okay.
The girl's grandmother later told the police that she had remained in bed until 1 a.m. So the sound woke her up at 12:30, but she then couldn't get back to sleep. And at 1 a.m., she got up and walked into the living room to check on the girls.
This is so normal.
Mm-hmm. She said her husband had been asleep next to her the entire evening. When she walked into the living room, Dora Rosenberg discovered a frightening sight. The front door was wide open and little Judith Ann was gone from her bed. Remember, she was sleeping in the living room under a window by the front door. Frantically, she raced around the house, waking her daughter Shirley. The 2 women went outside and circled the house in desperate search of Judith Ann. They did not find her.
Because somebody put her in a car and peeled out.
Yep.
And who all knew that she was there?
Right.
I mean, people watching at the public pool. Of course, her father, we'll call her the mistress or whatever we want to call her.
Mm-hmm.
I don't love this.
Dora Rosenberg then ran back into the house after they did a once-over of the yard and whatnot, and she woke up her husband. She cried out that Judy's missing, get the car, and help us look for her. So, sleepy and startled, Harry Rosenberg ran out of the house. He was still wearing his pajamas. He, too, looked outside for Judith and then dashed back inside to his bedroom to put on his trousers. And this is where he noticed something strange. His trousers were not on the bedpost, a place he religiously hung them every night before going to sleep.
I can see it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. My grandpa did that.
Mm-hmm.
He would later tell police that he found them on the living room floor near the front door. He also said that he found that the back pockets where he kept his car keys and a handkerchief had been turned inside out, like as if they'd been ransacked.
Someone was looking for his keys, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Was his car stolen?
We'll get to it. The information would later pique the interest of detectives, but for now it was just something strange to Harry Rosenberg. Outside the home, the family realized the Rosenbergs' car was missing.
I knew it.
It was a green 1952 Oldsmobile with a gray top. It had been parked on the curb in front of the house since the afternoon. Fearing the worst, Shirley Roberts picked up the telephone and dialed Miami police. That night, Miami detective Irving Whitman was working the graveyard shift at police headquarters. He was a transplant from New York, just like the Rosenbergs were. The 32-year-old Whitman had never worked such a case. With what the lanky detective didn't know then was that the call from the Rosenbergs' home was about to turn his career upside down. From the moment, all Whitman knew was that a little girl on vacation from Maryland was missing in Miami, and he was charged with trying to find her. So he goes to the Rosenbergs' home. He questions the adults there.
Of course.
That's when he learns that Judith Ann's father was a union leader and a politician. So he immediately calls the FBI. His theory was that she might have been kidnapped for some kind of ransom. Agents and police swarmed the area. They searched the neighborhood. They spread out across the city, issuing a call to all police cars on patrol to look for the little girl who might be wearing white and red polka dot nightgown pajamas.
Okay.
So James Roberts finally arrives home at 2:30 a.m.
Oh, God. You don't think about it in the days before cell phones.
No.
How would you know where to ring to let him know that his child is
because
missing?
you don't know where he's at because he's clubbing with Dorothy.
Yeah, assuming he was actually clubbing with Dorothy.
Right. We'll get to it.
I know. I know what you're going to give me right now.
So he learns, of course, at 2:30 a.m.
Is this a solved unsolved? Is this one of these ones where I'm going to have a real specific opinion about what happened?
I don't know.
Okay.
I honestly, I'm not, I'm not sure where I land on it. I have strong theories and opinions, yes, but we'll see. At daybreak, investigators made a troubling discovery. A Miami patrol officer reported finding the Rosenbergs' car.
Okay, I'm waiting for this.
It was off of Kirk Street in Coconut Grove between South Bayshore Drive and Biscayne Bay.
Okay, we were just in that area.
There. Mm-hmm. Today, the stretch of the road marks the north end of David Kennedy Park, a popular spot for joggers. The park runs along South Bayshore Drive, a busy roadway buffed by mansions on which is probably the only hilly section of Miami.
And within miles of Calle Ocho, they were on 11th Street, but not super far.
13th. Yeah.
13th.
Yes,
Sorry. I don't know why 11 was in my brain.
It's all right. So we have firefighters, we have police officers, you know, they all surround essentially the Rosenbergs' car, and it is murdered down in the sand beside the Bayfront Street. In other words, they could not get the car out. Okay, it was a futile effort. It was so stuck in the sand. The thing is, though, there's no sign of Judith Ann. The police reasoned that she could be in like the nearby bay or may have been left to wander in the mangroves. The news only got worse. At 6:15 a.m., Detective Whitman remembers a Miami fireman moved aside a clump of bushes to block like the south car entrance and saw something. He yelled for Detective Whitman to come over. Under the bush, they found the body of Judith Ann. She was still in her white and red polka dot nightgown. Her head had been, trigger alert, by the way, because I know this is a 6-year-old child. Her head had been savagely beaten. Her hands were tied behind her back with a thin rope and a wash rag. The wash rag had been stuck in her mouth as well. It had been ripped.
Just silence her.
Mm-hmm. The blow was so severe to her head, and she had been also struck in the mouth, that the Dade County coroner said it had jarred many of her teeth loose. Now,
why?
I don't know.
So I'm going to tell you that this makes me feel like it's not her father, because I feel like parents don't tend to do things that are that violent if they're going to cause a death. It's usually accidental.
Right.
Or less graphic.
Well, it gets more perplexing.
Okay.
Her thighs and genitals showed bruises caused by a tree branch, Megan. A handkerchief, the same one taken from Harry Rosenberg's back pocket, along with his car keys, were tied as a gag to cover her mouth. A dish towel was knotted like a blindfold across her eyes, and her body was caked with a mix of blood and mud. The detective could tell that she had fought before being garroted and thrown into the tangle of underbush. There had been much bleeding from her nose, mouth, and groin area. Her left eye was swollen and blackened. And this is a direct quote from Detective Whitman. When I saw her poor little body like that, gagged and beaten, I couldn't help it. I broke down and cried. End
Yeah,
quote.
I want to.
Mm-hmm. He said, I just hope that she was unconscious through this. And actually, the coroner echoed that. Dr. Ben Shepard also had said that he had hoped she had been unconscious. He put her time of death between 1:30 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. As the lead investigator, Detective Whitman quickly assessed the crime. He was skeptical that the killer had actually used a tree branch to rape Judith Ann. It just didn't seem right in his mind. Of course, in the 1950s, it wouldn't.
Right.
Police found little evidence, though, to collect. So they knew, at this point in time, Detective Whitman had just a few law enforcement agents who knew of the horror of Judith Ann's death. And it would remain that way for a long time.
Really?
Mm-hmm. There are specific details that he was unwilling to release to anyone but him and only a very small, trusted part of his department.
Really?
On purpose, because he knows with the dad being a politician and a union lawyer, and the way that this is going to hit the streets, this is going to be shocking news that a 6-year-old had been murdered in this manner. He doesn't want all the details released. He wants to keep some close to the chest that only the murderer would know.
Okay.
For the future, okay?
Because now where we are with suspects, just from the investigation so far, clearly we have dad and mistress. Mm-hmm. Anybody that was in the house.
We have grandpa.
Correct. But I feel like they're going to be ruled out pretty quickly by virtue of the fact that they were there upon this discovery after a car peels out. Mm-hmm. And clearly none of them are in the car. I think that there's still a ton of possibility and credence to him, the family having been watched because of his political doings, and that she was kidnapped, and that this was some type of maybe even a ransom gone wrong.
Yeah.
Or are we talking about some potential serial killer and pedophile that was wandering around in the area and happened to keep an eye on this house?
Well, and that is a theory. We'll get more information from Grandma and Mom here in a minute. Okay. But that is one theory because
I just wanted to throw mine out.
Yeah. The big open window that she was sleeping under, they didn't have the curtains closed, and the girls had been dancing that night in front of that window. So they would have been visual, to the outside world. The news of the horrific murder rocks the town in the 1950s, okay? Headlines from Asia to Europe trumpeted news of a sex maniac on the prowl in sunny Miami. The city was under siege on the eve of the winter tourist season. It was bizarre. It became a total circus, and Detective Whitman got calls from all over the world. The Miami Herald and the Miami News, which were the main local newspapers of the time, called it Miami's most shocking crime in years. They issued warnings to readers, lock homes before retiring for the night, and warn children about molesters.
Oh, God.
So, at this point in time, there were people interviewed that are since been adults that still remember being terrified to go to sleep at night.
Absolutely. In the 1950s, it's one of the safer times, at least you feel like it's safer time in America. And you have little kids now that you have to have these uncomfortable conversations with about kidnappers and molesters.
Yep. And the Miami Police Department is being inundated with tips from a hysterical public. The media attention was unprecedented of the time. Politicians, state law enforcement officials, and even then acting governor Charlie Johns promised unlimited resources and a quick arrest. Detective Whitman's team and the Dade County State Attorney George Bottegen who was up for re-election this same year, were very much taking this case personally.
Yeah, it does make me worry when you have a situation like that, though, especially promising quick justice and a quick arrest, that sometimes the quick to arrest is not the right person.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Or it's not.
But sometimes it happens just to get the media and the press and the public off your back,
especially
right?
in an election year, because having been there before, you always want to look good.
You do, right. More gruesome details were to come. Despite the killer's efforts to make it seem like a sex crime, the coroner's report revealed that Judith Ann had not been raped.
Thank you. I wondered. So she was not actually molested. She
No.
simply had injuries that were near her genitals.
Yes, it was staged, Megan. This is exactly what Detective Whitman's first suspicion was to begin with. Because remember, he said it just didn't seem right that she would have been raped with a tree branch, you know.
And again, we've heard worse cases and
Of
all
course.
kinds of terrible types of forcible sodomy and rape with objects, but that was clearly not the case here.
No, it just was supposed to be. Detective Whitman said, and I quote, "The killer wanted to make it look like a sexual crime, but it wasn't," end quote. So, days and weeks following Judith Ann's murder, nearly 200 men, known sex offenders, were rounded up and interrogated. Since the murder was labeled the work of a sexual deviant, many homosexual men were added to the list of these rounded up. Detectives turned their attention on the idea that a stranger, a burglar, or even a peeping Tom had snatched Judith Ann. And yes, I thought that was disgusting.
Thank you, because my face,
I know. Yep.
It profiling wise, that doesn't even make sense.
But in 1950s, a homosexual man was a sexual deviant.
A predator, even upon young female children, apparently.
The most disgusting
It just doesn't
prejudice.
fit. But you know what? They didn't understand. It wasn't a common social norm, the homosexuality piece, even though, just for the record, that's been around since the beginning of time. But
For
hey,
sure.
they-
But,
it wasn't
unevolved.
something-
We
it
are
wasn't something-
unevolved.
Yes, we are an unevolved
Species.
Thank you.
We still are.
I was going to say creature, but I prefer species.
Yeah, it's true. We're still evolving. Yeah.
Like we've said before, the aliens watch us from space and go, nope. We are not going to go to the white trash of the universe.
That's
That is Earth.
They're not there yet. They've got a lot of evolution to take place yet. They are still very prejudiced against one another for being different.
Still walk on two legs. They don't fly, and they only use 10% of their brains.
Right.
Eventually, they'll get there.
I wouldn't give us a time of day stop either. No. That's like stopping at the Uranus chocolate factory on your way to...
We are the universe's truck stop.
We are. And not even the good one like Buc-ee's.
No, this one has showers and shame.
I know, it's awful. So anyway, so here they are. They're working all angles of this case, you guys. They are wondering, like I said, was this a peeping Tom? Was this a sexual deviant? Fueling speculation of the sexual deviant grabbing Judith Ann was a sympathetic spokeswoman, Shirley Roberts, the girl's mother. In her effort to help police solve her daughter's slaying, she tried to recall all the events of the night. She remembered that Judith Ann had danced around naked in the living room in the minutes after they had been given a shower.
That's such a normal kid thing to do, you guys.
Yep. She said, "What I'm trying to bring about," she wrote the police in a letter, "is that anyone standing, peeking in the side window of my parents' room would have clearly been able to see her. Many that would explain why, or not many, maybe. Sorry, guys. Even with the readers on, I get in my own way. Maybe that would explain why he walked by Betty on the back porch and my mother's silverware in the dining room. In his sick mind, he had been excited by Judy because she was the one that had been dancing naked in front of the living room window."
I don't think this is correct, Mom.
I know.
I think this was a cover-up, and it was someone she knew.
I know. I agree. And I really think that's where, we'll get to it. I'm getting ahead of myself. 2 months passed and police had not made an arrest, not for lack of trying. Investigators had chased several promising leads and all led to dead ends. The media spotlight didn't fade. Among the many potential suspects, the one the media dubbed the man in white, at least a dozen people called police to say that they'd seen a mysterious man dressed in all white walking near the area where the little girl had been murdered. After several stories describing the alleged killer, a man finally came forward. He turned out to be an innocent nighttime hospital orderly at nearby Mercy Hospital who'd always walked to work in his white scrubs. Then there was the story of a drifter from Atlanta named Walter Yu.
Okay. Now we have the random serial killer possibility here. I was waiting for the theory.
Now, Walter was a Cherokee who told authorities he was with the man who had abducted Judith Ann. They brought him down to Miami and found out he knew absolutely nothing about the crime scene. Remember, I told you they were keeping some details very close to the chest.
And you have these crazies, even in the 50s, that want to take responsibility for the popular news story of the time.
Yep, he made it all up to grab the police's attention.
Okay.
Detectives soon concluded that the killer must have known the family's routine. This new theory only triggered new and more troubling questions. How did the killer know which car would start with the keys taken from the grandfather's pocket? And how did the killer know that the grandfather kept his keys in his pants hanging on the bedpost of his bed, right? Why did the intruder ignore Judith Ann's little sister Betty sleeping by the unlocked rear door where the killer had likely entered? And why didn't Judith Ann scream? That's the biggest thing. Police started looking closer to home.
Did she have a chance?
I don't know. Right.
They found that rag. I mean, was there something on it? I don't know how chemical tests were at the time. Was she chloroformed?
Right. All members of the family are under suspicion, announced frustrated Dade State Attorney George Brodigan. This is a heinous crime. It has to be committed by someone who had knowledge of the house.
I agree.
In late September, rumors spread that detectives were close to solving the case and a grand jury was going to be impaneled in Miami.
Ooh, to indict someone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is good movement.
In a shocking turn of events, the prime suspect emerged. James Roberts, the girl's father.
This is not shocking, I don't think, to anyone.
The big burly James Roberts had been local president, international representative, and organizer for the UAW before becoming an attorney in 1950. He still represented the union and had political aspirations. The Miami detectives sent to snoop into Roberts' life and background in Baltimore said that he had not been totally truthful with the police. James Roberts told police that he didn't have any enemies that he knew of, and he had not received any threats from anyone. But they heard talk that Roberts needed cash after his failed bid to enter politics. That maybe he had concocted a desperate plan to stage his daughter's kidnapping to extort money from his in-laws in Miami. But then the plot had gone terribly wrong, and Judith Ann had to be killed, perhaps out of fear that she would identify the person who took her in the middle of the night. It didn't help matters that James Roberts, a supposed family man from all other appearances, was bar hopping with a female client the night his daughter was abducted.
So there's the theory that he didn't even necessarily do this himself, but that he set this whole thing up and said, the car keys are going to be in my father-in-law's pants pocket, hanging from his bed. My daughter's going to be sleeping in the front.
Yes.
And then she ends up either maybe accidentally getting killed, maybe she tried to run away or she was fighting, or they decided that she knew too much and needed to be taken out.
Yeah.
Okay, I can buy that theory.
I
can buy it because...
This is the one that I can get into, too, because he wasn't the one actually physically doing the abduction, other than...
But I want to know more about him being a terrible fucker, because to be able to make that arrangement to happen to your own child, there has to be some type of mental issue and detachment to your family in general, which he's showing by clubbing with the hot young thing.
Right, that's getting a divorce. He's helping her get a divorce.
Oh, I bet he helped her real good.
He's 43 and she's 25, and he was bar hopping with her all night. Tell me that.
I'm 47. I can't even. What would I do with a 25-year-old? Will they clean my house?
For real. Like, I have no sexual use for
a 25-year-old.
No.
Apparently,
but
we're missing out if we ask like Cher and Madonna. I know. By the way,
that's true. And just men are different. And Dorothy was described as being very attractive. So, however, Dorothy and Shirley were friends. But I'm not saying that that's never happened before, too, where you've trusted your husband with a friend and then it went wrong.
And again, the 50s, maybe she didn't care. She's like, I have these two kids. You exhaust me.
Yeah, good point.
Just sleep with her.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hang out with my parents in the sun and look at the Cabana Boys.
Very possible. So the state attorney brought in witnesses who gave statements to the grand jury. Among them was a private detective who they would eventually stake their entire case on to make an arrest. The man told police he had seen Roberts near the murder scene the night Judith Ann was abducted. Based on his statement in September 1954, the grand jury charged Mr. Roberts with the murder of his daughter. Two other people identified only as John Doe and Mary Rowe were also indicted. The surprise indictments splashed the story of the murder across the newspaper's front pages again. James Roberts, who by now had returned as law practiced in Baltimore, surrendered and was driven back to Miami to stand trial. He was released on bond 3 weeks later to await trial. At this point, it seemed everything pointed to James Roberts, Judith's father. Even his own family members were convinced. At Roberts' bond hearing, Harry Rosenberg was asked if he had an opinion as to why the crime was committed, and Harry said, and I quote, "Yes, I believe it was to have been a harmless kidnapping, but something happened and she was killed."
This is
quote.
Grandpa's
This
opinion?
is Grandpa. Mm-hmm. He said that he felt one of the people involved was his son-in-law. He said that James Roberts had acted strangely after his daughter's murder, wanting to return to Baltimore right away and trying to avoid detectives altogether. A judge still released Roberts on a $10,000 bond. They also questioned Dorothy Lawrence about her relationship with James Roberts. Dorothy Lawrence backed up his story, saying he had been with her except for maybe a 15-minute period, not nearly long enough time to carry out the crime, in their opinion. She also told them that on the drive home from Baltimore to Florida, James and Shirley Roberts had argued about James's womanizing in front of her. So Shirley, not real happy about, because now it's in the public eye. Yep. You know, it was one thing when she was just like, whatever, you're a womanizer, you're a dick, you're doing this in front of me. But now it's casting suspicion.
We're under a microscope.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I get that. It's easy to see why detectives eyed James Roberts as a prime suspect. His actions the day before his daughter vanished didn't exactly scream Dad of the Year.
No.
And he missed the pool outing in Coral Gables. He didn't make it to dinner at his in-laws, and he wasn't home to tuck his daughters into bed. At his daughter's inquest, he told police that he spent the day with Dorothy Lawrence, meeting with another attorney and then helping her find a job, which not his job as her attorney to help his client find a job, by the by.
I think we all know that he's not just her attorney.
Correct.
A union attorney helping this hot little thing with her divorce.
Uh-huh.
Come on.
Right. And helping her find a job because he's just such a good guy.
Come on.
Yeah.
I bet there was a job involved.
Oh, there was. There were jobs. Mm-hmm. As James Roberts told it, he and Dorothy Lawrence made the rounds of local nightclubs. They had dinner on Biscayne Boulevard and then went on to the 1200 bar at 1260 Southwest 8th Street, just 5 blocks from the Rosenberg home. Just 5 blocks from the Rosenberg home. Remember, there's a 15-minute span where he wasn't available to Dorothy.
Okay.
They chose the spot because they had hoped the owner, a friend of James Roberts, would cash Dorothy Lawrence's travel checks, allegedly. At the inquest, police asked James Roberts if he had come home at any time that night. He insisted that he had not. He said, "We stayed there till about 10, and then we went to the Jungle Club to see what it looked like. We drove back to the beach and went to the Circus Bar, then to the Paddock Club to see if they had a job for her. I believe we left the Paddock at about 1:45 a.m., and I took Ms. Lawrence to the home of my sister-in-law where she was staying. Then I drove back to the Rosenbergs and found everyone outside and Judy missing."
At like 1 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Or after 1 o'clock.
2:30.
2:30.
2:30. Mm-hmm. So from
I wonder
1:40.
if his sister-in-law can corroborate anything in terms of time frames as to when her visitor would have returned.
Right, because he says we left about 1:45, and then he didn't get home till 2:30. When he was asked if he thought his daughter's murder might have been a sex crime, James Roberts responded, "At first I felt like it was. I couldn't imagine anyone else doing it, even if they had a grievance against me." He said that the case was very strange, especially because someone had known to find the keys to Mr. Rosenberg's car in the back pocket of his trousers, and that his trousers were going to be on the bedpost. Certainly, James Roberts said, it must have been someone familiar with the movements of the family in the house. That's a direct quote from him.
Yeah.
Why is he saying the family and the house and not my family and their house?
Detachment or attempt to.
Yeah. So then the prosecutor's case began to crack. Dorothy Lawrence, the one witness who was with James Roberts the night of the murder, came forward with allegations of witness intimidation. Dorothy Lawrence charged that she was brought in by prosecutors who badgered and browbeat her into admitting that she had changed her story about seeing a rope in Roberts' car the day of his daughter's murder. So she initially gave that information and then came back and said, I was forced to give that information. I didn't see a rope.
Okay.
She said 2 investigators with the state's attorney office had insisted that she change her story. They told me that they knew Mr. Roberts had done it and they needed her to say that to prove it.
Really? Do we really think that happened?
I don't know. I'm not sure I trust 25-year-old Dorothy.
I don't either, but I don't love it when you hear that a case needs to be solved quickly, that people are up for re-election, and now you have an allegation that she was led into making certain statements by law enforcement, and I don't love it. It hurts in my tummy.
I know. It hurts your attorney tummy. Yes. I get it. The case was about to fall apart because the private detective who had testified that he had seen James Roberts in a club near the Rosenberg home at the time of the murder, he was found to be less than credible.
God bless it.
His eyewitness account was eventually thrown out, and then came another setback. The Florida Supreme Court issued a ruling that barred the use of James Roberts' lie detector results, leaving the prosecutors with no evidence tying James Roberts to his daughter's murder.
Yeah, that was around the same time frame that all of those were basically made inadmissible. Yeah. You can't even speak about that if you bring up the P word.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, I couldn't tell you if he failed or if it was a pass or fail or questionable. I'm not sure. Yep. Yeah. So by December, charges are dropped against James Roberts. Now, still convinced the killer knew the little girl well, investigators turned their attention on another family member. Their next suspect was Judith Ann's grandfather, Harry Rosenberg.
I know, but this breaks my heart because I'm just not feeling it. Are you going to tell me some stuff about Harry I didn't know before?
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you some more things, yes. So police felt that they had enough evidence to bring a case against him, too. They hinted at some sinister allegations against him involving children in New York. Remember, he retired there out of the New York Garment District.
Yeah, don't tell me he was a perpetrator up in NY.
Well, their most damning evidence was found in Harry Rosenberg's Oldsmobile. When the car was found, the driver's seat was still pushed forward. Police surmised that whomever drove it last was very short. Harry Rosenberg was just under 5 feet tall. Under 5 feet tall.
Yeah, he's a tiny little fella.
He is very tiny. He's shorter than I am.
Yeah, I can picture this because I had a grandpa that was super tiny like that.
Their new theory, maybe the grandfather had tried to molest the girl and she cried out.
Yeah.
The case against Harry Rosenberg had one major flaw. How did the grandfather make it back home from Coconut Grove without a car? Detectives walked from where Judith's body was dumped back to the Rosenbergs' home and determined it was possible.
Really?
It could be done by taking some shortcuts, Detective Whitman said. But what about the statement taken from his wife, Dora, who told police that her husband was next to her in bed the whole night that Judith Ann had disappeared? Remember, she said she woke up at 12:30.
Yeah.
He was there and she laid in bed until 1.
And he was still there when she got out of bed to go check on the children.
So
unless she's conspiring.
Is she lying? That's what detectives want to know. Harry Rosenberg was questioned repeatedly by detectives. An angry Rosenberg charged that police made him a prime suspect because he had complained bitterly about the lack of leads in the case. He, too, hired a private investigator to gather evidence. Police never brought charges against Harry Rosenberg, but it cast a shadow over the rest of his life. Warren G. Holmes, a police sergeant at the time of Judith Ann's murder, was in charge of the Miami Police Department's lie detector bureau. He long had a theory about Judith Ann's killer. He believes it was a 16-year-old boy who was picked up in the hours following the murder. The teenager was questioned at length by investigators, but was released. This detective, Warren G. Holmes, said, quote, "I'm totally convinced he's the killer," end quote. Holmes had known the teen while working as a beat cop along downtown Miami's red light district during the 1950s. And this is a direct quote from him, too. "I think He saw the little girl through the window and had to have her, end quote. Detective Holmes said, agreeing with Shirley Roberts' theory that her daughter had been grabbed by a child predator who had seen her dancing naked that night. He remembers the teen lived behind a drugstore near the Rosenbergs' home, and that under questioning, the teen admitted peering into the Rosenbergs' windows. The teen was never arrested, but he always stayed on Warren G. Holmes' mind.
So he's a window peeper. Mm-hmm. He's admitted to looking in windows, specifically that window.
And he's known by the beat cop to be a creeper.
And he lived in the area.
And this man was in charge of the lie detector bureau at the time. Okay. And without it being explicitly said, I believe that he gave this 16-year-old a lie detector and he failed it.
Some type of a poly. He knew something. It's interesting, though, because... were there any observations? Like, how did he come to be in the area?
Well, I have some more before we get to that.
All right.
In 1964, a decade after Judith's murder, Holmes said that the 16-year-old, his wife called police to say that her husband confessed during a violent argument that he had killed Judith Ann Roberts. So... Holmes, remember, in charge of the lie detector bureau, gave this wife a lie detector test and she passed it. She was telling the truth
about the argument
and the admission. During a violent argument, he used it as a threat against her.
Like,
essentially,
I will kill you. I've done it before.
Mm-hmm. So when he gave the test to, at this time, is now an adult. He's 26 years old. He's not a 16-year-old. He registered no emotion to any questions, including whether or not he killed Judith Ann. So 10 years later, I still believe that he gave him one at 16 and he failed it. But 10 years later, at this point, he's so numb, he has no emotions registering on the 1964 type of lie detector. Sure. He said it's as if he had ice water in his veins. Like, to see no emotion to any question is unheard of.
He had definitely gained the ability to self-regulate things that are not regulatable, like or your blood pressure, your heart rate.
Yeah. This Detective Holmes, still to this day, even though at this point in time, you know, this would have been 16-year-old boy at the time is now deceased because when this book was written, it was copyrighted 2007. And so he would have been in his 70s at that time. But the detective was still alive and said, I know he did it. Like, this is the guy who killed Judith.
That's how the detective feels.
Yes. Yep. So 42 years would pass before the Miami police would take another serious crack at solving the murder of Judith Ann Roberts. In 2006, a band of detectives with the Miami Police Department's cold case squad reopened the files and began tracking down old leads. They interviewed Detective Whitman and Warren G. Holmes, but came up empty. We had a lot of, this is a direct quote, we had a lot of suspicion and conjecture, but we never get a case tight enough against anyone to take it to a jury, end quote. Today, the remains of Judith Ann Roberts are buried in a pink casket in a cemetery in West Miami. It's the same place where mafia kingpin Mayor Lansky is also buried. The little girl would have turned 60 on August 9th, 2007. The Rosenbergs and James Roberts have all since died. Records indicate that Judith Ann's mother, Shirley, and her younger sister, Betty, may have still been alive in 2007, but hard to say now.
She would have been like 80 now.
They haven't spoken publicly about the case since the 1950s. Warren Holmes is now long retired from the Miami Police Department, but works for them as a consultant, and he lived in Broward County. He may not be alive anymore. This was 2007. So Detective Whitman eventually left the Miami Police Department and became an attorney in Miami. But in an interview in 2006, it was clear that the then 68-year-old former detective could not shake the memory of Judith Ann's murder. He still keeps copies of investigative material from the case in his home office in a Palmetto Bay near Miami, and he still occasionally visits the site in Coconut Grove where Judith Ann's battered body was discovered so long ago. For all intents and purposes, he's still on the case. He maintains that Judith Ann and her killer were not strangers, and he's kept 3 details about the murder a secret. Things only the killer would know, just in case a suspect does emerge.
Oh my God.
The details would be crucial facts because little physical evidence is left of the murder scene. This is a quote. "Whenever a possible suspect pops up, I've come in, I've asked them those 3 questions," he said, "and no one has known the answers," end quote. By now, I would imagine, this was, like I said, 2007, so by now he has probably since passed away, and it is my hope that he has left those 3 answers with someone he trusts on the department.
I hope so.
Because I think that is miraculous that he has these 3 details that go along with 3 questions.
But I have so many questions about the questions, because if it's the true killer or who's going to answer those honestly?
Right. Well, I like that.
But I don't know what his questions are.
He maintains that Judith Ann and the killer were not strangers.
But the 16-year-old who the other investigator is convinced killed her, they would have been strangers unless there was some connection we were unaware of.
The detectives don't agree on this. Kind of fascinating, huh?
Oh, gosh.
And I don't know, do you think in today's investigation work, was this solvable?
Probably.
I think, yes, I think so. And but there was no body fluid. There was no, besides Judith Ann's blood, of course.
DNA.
Yeah, I'm not certain that there was. I don't know. It really fascinated me. It's tragic. I think I agree with Grandpa Rosenberg. I think that Dad most certainly had something to do with it. There was some more information, not from this book, that I was just perusing in there's not a whole lot of solid research out there about Judith Ann's murder, by the way.
More just articles?
Yes, and this was the best that gave actual details in things. The best resource I could find. But one article talked about how, Judith Ann, there was a lot of medical bills. She was sickly. She had that tumor in her throat. As you had indicated, was that cancer? She just was a sickly child. To me, is that another thing weighing on Dad of why, like, if you're going to set up that one of your children's going to be kidnapped for a fake ransom because you need money, you pick the sickly one, even though she's older and could potentially fight back, rather than the 3-year-old who would have been much easier, in my opinion, to kidnap and was also on a porch.
Right. Just as vulnerable.
Yep. But I just wonder if he had a little less attachment to Judith Ann over all of her health, things and costing him money, medical bills and things like that.
If he doesn't have any knowledge and wasn't involved at all, it's just so coincidental then what was happening with him at the time when some stranger passes upon the house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I also am concerned about the statements that this teenager made later during this argument. Did he completely make it up? Right. When he was screaming at the wife, who then passes the poly about how, I've done it before, I killed Judith Ann, or whatever it was that he may have said.
Did Dad
hire him?
Right. He obviously knows people in this area, Megan. He allegedly took Dorothy specifically to a nightclub to see about getting her a job because he was friends with the owner. He has hung out in this area. This is where his in-laws are. So if this 16-year-old lives conveniently close and has a reputation for being a creeper, who needs money more than a 16-year-old, And so perhaps he just, I don't know, promised to share some of the ransom money with him.
So both are tied together, possibly. In the meantime, we have this longtime detective who has these 3 questions who doesn't necessarily believe that we found the suspect.
Yeah. That no one's been able to answer those 3 questions accurately.
I so bad want to know these 3 questions.
I know, me too. But I'm leaving us on a cliffhanger because we're just going to have to hang here because I don't.
Oh my gosh,
he didn't. They're not in print what those questions are at this point in time for good reason. So,
do you want a very short brain bath?
I do.
All right. So, I don't like to be political, but every once in a while there are organizations that post things that I find amusing.
Yes,
PETA being one of them. Okay, so
PETA posted something amusing?
They did.
Okay.
And usually it can be kind of aggressive and what have you. And so they start off with a typical PETA post that would be, cows are friends, not food. And there is a picture of an adorable cow.
Beautiful cow.
And I love cows. I think they're adorable, but I also have no problem eating them or their products.
Right. Appears to be a Hereford. Okay.
And this farm girl, spoken like a farm girl. So cows are friends, not food.
Yeah.
And this person responds, name one cow you're friends with, as we might say.
Sure.
And PETA very quickly responds, your mom. This is from Board Panda, by the way. Yep. Cows are friends, not food. Name one cow you're friends with, your mom. Yo mama.
Your mama.
Yo mama.
Okay.
He yo mama'd him.
I like that.
So
I
there's
like that.
there's your PETA being funny because I thought it was enjoyable.
I like that. And you know what? I'm going to piggyback. You like my play
You're
on
gonna throw
words
me right
there.
under the bus, aren't you?
I am. You said PETA, so I have
did.
to. I don't know if you guys have this commercial in your area, but there is like an ASPCA commercial, which is another form of PETA, essentially, different organization. But they have this tragic commercial that carries on far too long. It is like a 2-minute commercial at least, might even be 2.5. And the song in the background is Sarah McLachlan's Angel.
It is.
Okay. It is
I love Sarah McLachlan, and I love that song.
It's a beautiful song, but it is a heartbreaking song when the ASPCA is also playing pictures that over and over again of abused animals.
Yes.
Most specifically dogs.
Very
there are
specifically
cats too,
dogs.
but there's a lot of abused dogs. They're sad, they're crying, they're bleeding and shaking. It is you might as well just rip into my body, grab my heart, rip it out, and take a bite out of it right in front of me. That is how profound the commercial is.
Thanks for setting this stage, Charnell.
So they need to know. So we are on the cruise and it's karaoke night, and Megan and I love us some karaoke.
Oh, yes, we do.
And she gets in line. They're only taking 12 people. She got in line fast enough to be one of the lucky 12 to be able to sing for that hour. And she fucking chooses Sarah McLachlan's Angel, which she can sing beautifully, by the way. Okay. But my husband, who has suffered 3 strokes this year.
Oh my God.
I look over at him.
It's a look
And
of horror.
he has this terrible look on his face. And I was like, he's not about to say anything about her singing. What is that look? And he leans over and says, all I can think of is that commercial, and I just want a puppy. Someone give me a puppy to hold. At that, I lost it. At that moment, I'm dying laughing during her beautiful rendition. Then I, of course, have to tell her husband, Jason.
Who's also laughing now.
Yes, and Tasha about it, that Matt just wants to cuddle a puppy because she's invoked this trigger in him from this stupid ASPCA commercial.
I come to sit down, by the way, and they're like, you sing the Dead Puppy song. And I'm like, what? What do you mean dead pup? Oh my God. And then it occurs to me as well.
Right.
The ASPCA
I had
song.
not thought of it at all until I look over and see my husband barely keeping it together. And he's just like, I just want a puppy. Someone get me a puppy.
Well, I'm glad I invoked a puppy response in your spouse.
You did. So there's that. Thank you all so much for supporting us by listening. If you would like to support us more to keep us on air, feel free to click on the Join Patreon and get hundreds of very raw episodes of bonus content of us as well, and we would appreciate that. But if not, totally understand and just keep listening, because that supports us too. And until next time, we hope that you keep it curious
and keep listening.
Bye-bye. Am I supposed to say till next time?
I don't know.
Yeah,
We made it work.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ta-ta for now.